1 Kings chapter 7. And Solomon constructed his own house for 13 years, and he wholly completed his house. And he constructed the house of the forest of Lebanon. 100 cubits was its length, and 50 cubits its width, and 30 cubits its height, upon 4 rows of columns of cedars, and protrusions of cedars for the columns. And he decorated with fretwork in cedar the house above upon the sides of the columns. And the number of the columns was 45, 10 and 5 in one row. And 3 ridges, with place upon place thrice. And all the doorways and the places were 4-cornered, being arched over, from the doorway upon the door thrice. And the columned porch of the columns was 50 cubits in length, and 30 cubits in width, being joined together by a columned porch in front of them. And columns and thick beams were at the front to them. And the columned porch of the throne of which he judged there was a columned porch for the judgment seat. And it was decorated with fretwork in cedars from floor unto upper room. And his house in which he shall sit there, 1 courtyard is expanding to these according to this work. And Solomon built a house for the daughter of Pharaoh, whom Solomon took, according to this columned porch. These are all from out of valuable stones being chiseled, at an interval inside from the foundations unto the moldings, and outside to the great courtyard, the laying a foundation with great valuable stones 10 cubits and 8 cubits in size. And on top were valuable stones according to the same measure, hewn stones and cedars of the great courtyard, round about with 3 rows of hewn stones, and a row being chiseled of cedar, even to the inner courtyard of the house of the Lord, and to the columned porch of the house. And King Solomon sent and took Hiram from out of Tyre, a son of a widow woman, and this one was from the tribe of Naphtali, and his father was a Tyrian man, a fabricator of brass, and being accomplished of the wisdom of the craft, and of understanding, and of full knowledge to do all the work in brass. And he was brought to King Solomon, and he did every work. And he cast in a furnace the 2 columns for the columned porch of the house. 18 cubits was the height of the column, and the perimeter had a 2 and 10 cubits measuring cord encircling it. And so was the 2nd column. And he made 2 capitals to put upon the heads of the molten columns of brass. 5 cubits was the height of the 1 capital, and 5 cubits was the height of the 2nd capital. And he made latticed works to cover the capitals of the columns, 7 to the capital, to the 1, and 7 to the capital, to the 2nd. And a hanging work, 2 rows of pomegranates of brass, being made of lattice works, a hanging work, row upon row. And thus he did for the 2nd capital, and capitals upon the heads of the columns, a work of lily for the columned porch, 4 cubits, and a ridge upon both of the columns, and on top of the sides of the capital. And the pomegranates, 200 in rows upon the 2nd capital. And he set up the columns of the columned porch of the temple. And he set up the right column, and called the name of it Jachin. And he set up the left column, and called the name of it Boaz. And upon the tops of the columns was a work of lily. And the work of the columns was finished. And he made the cast sea, 10 by a cubit from its rim unto its rim, globular, round about itself. 5 by a cubit was its height. And a measuring line meeting together of 30 cubits encircled it. And supports from beneath its rims round about encircled it, 10 by a cubit, raising up the sea round about. 2 rows of supports cast in the foundry furnace of them. And 12 oxen were underneath the sea, 3 looking to the north, and 3 looking to the west, and 3 looking to the south, and 3 looking to the east. And the sea was upon them on top. And all the oxen posteriors were to the inside, and the thickness of it was a palm, and the rim of it was as a rim work of a cup with a lily bud. It had a capacity of 2,000 cus. And he made 10 bases of brass. 4 cubits was the length of the one base, and 4 cubits the width of it, and 3 cubits was the height of it. And this is the work of the base joining it, and joining between the protruding parts. And upon the joineries between the protruding parts were lions, and oxen, and cherubim. And upon the protruding parts, so also from above and from below the lions and the oxen, were places of a descending work. And 4 wheels of brass were to the one base, and the fastenings of brass and its 4 parts of their protrusion supports were from beneath the bathing tubs, and protrusion supports for a man to pour from the other side were situated before. And the mouth of it, within the top and upward, was 1 cubit, and the mouth of it was globular, a thing made thus, a cubit and half a cubit. And upon its mouth were carvings, and their small pillars were 4-cornered, not globular. And 4 wheels were underneath the small pillars, and hands were in the wheels in the base. And the height of the one wheel was 1.5 cubits, and the work of the wheels was as the work of chariot wheels, and their hands and their backs and their matters were all casted. And 4 protrusion supports were upon the 4 corners of the one base. From out of the base were its shoulders, and upon the head of the base 1/2 cubit was its globular size round about upon the head of the base. And the hands of it and its joineries were of it, and it opened upon the beginnings of its hands. And its joinery was cherubim, and lions, and standing palms, each being next to the other in front of it inside round about. According to this he made 10 bases, with 1 order and 1 measure to all. And he made 10 pots of brass, having the capacity of 40 cus to the 1 pot, measuring 4 cubits. And 1 pot was upon the one base for the 10 bases, and he placed the 10 bases, 5 on the protrusion support of the house at the right sides, and 5 on the protrusion support of the house at the left sides. And the sea on the protrusion support of the house was at the right sides according to the east from the side of the south. And Hiram made the kettles, and the tongs, and the bowls. And Hiram completed making all the works which he made for King Solomon in the house of the Lord, 2 columns, and the twisted works of the carvings being upon the heads of the 2 columns, and 2 latticed works to cover both the twisted carvings being upon the columns, and the pomegranates, 400, to both the latticed works, 2 rows of pomegranates to the 1 latticed work, to cover all over both the twisted works, being upon both of the columns. And the 10 bases, and the 10 pots upon the bases, and the 1 sea, and the 12 oxen underneath the sea, and the kettles, and the tongs, and the bowls, and all the items which Hiram made for King Solomon for the house of the Lord were entirely of brass. In the adjacent area of the Jordan the king cast them in the thick earth between Succoth and between Zarthan. And Solomon the king put unweighed all the items from out of the exceeding multitude there was not a weight of the brass. And Solomon made all the items in the house of the Lord, the golden altar, and the table upon which are the breads of the golden place-setting, and the 5 lampstands at the right sides, and 5 at the left sides, in front of the davir, being completely made golden, and the oil lamp bowls, and the lamps, and the golden oil funnels, and the thresholds, and the nails, and the bowls, and the saucers, and the golden incense pans joined, and the doorways of the doors of the innermost house, of the Holy of Holies, and the doors of the house of the temple were of gold. And all the work which Solomon did was fulfilled for the house of the Lord. And Solomon carried in the holy things of David his father, the silver and the gold, and the equipment he put into the treasury of the house of the Lord.